Hi, I'm Erin Molan.
She was one of the first women to put her face in front of the camera in a male-dominated sport.
You know, the anxiety and I'd feel in the lead up to a show, like, you know, Monday, working in the newsroom and the Footy Show being a Thursday night. And as well as doing my job in the newsroom, as well as preparing to do that job on Thursday night, I was also trying to prepare for what I knew. It wouldn't matter what I did, what I said, what I wore, how incredible I was, how much I nailed it. I knew what would happen on that Thursday night afterwards.
The reaction she received and what she copped is more than what the average person will be able to take.
The level that it went to over the next, say, 5 or 10 years was pretty horrific. And a lot of them, you know, 2 or 3 of them went from online to stalking me in person, having to be arrested, police charged. You know, me fearing for my life. It was a really hard period. And what makes me sad is that should have been, I mean, God, I grew up watching that show and I was the first woman to sit on that panel, then to co-host, then to host.
She fought through, she trailblazed her way, and she's led the way for a lot of female hosts that have now taken that main host seat.
There's always positives out of every negative. I think you can always find something. So to be the first in so many different ways, you know, if that's made it easier for other women after me, then that makes me really, really happy.
Erin, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, boys. It's a real honour to be here with you. And yeah, I love your show. I've seen bits and pieces and you've got great chemistry, great banter. And yeah, it's an honour for me to be on it. So thanks for having me.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Well, we'll give the people a bit of insight on what Erin's done through her career and who Erin is. So to me, Erin is a piece of my childhood growing up, you know, watching the Footy Show every weekend, or every Thursday night, sorry. And, you know, through the weekends, through the footy. But all in all, she started at Win, got through to 9 News. Top of that, led the Footy Show. She's now on Today FM every morning. And she's also doing Sky News. So in terms of women in media and women in sport, she's one of the leading ladies in our opinion here at UBF, and a true trailblazer for women's sport and women's media. So, Erin, you want to tell them anything that I've missed, anything about yourself?
Oh my God.
That was quite in detail.
All of my amazing achievements you left out. No, that was lovely. That sums it up.
Yeah. Well, should we kick into our first question?
Abdul, mate, you lead the way.
All right. So from the early days in Canberra, working at your community television station, what was it like back then as a woman in media? And what were some of the challenges you had to face trying to build your career from a starting point?
Yeah, I think for anyone in media, it's always, I say really challenging at the start, but to be honest, I feel like it doesn't get any less challenging the further along you get. It kind of, what you have to lose becomes greater almost. So even though you might be better at your job and things might come more naturally to you, the jobs and the gigs that you have are higher profile, they're better paying, they're more prominent. So you've still kind of got that thing where you could lose it. So that's a bigger deal. But when you start out, the challenges are very different, but you're on much less money and you're doing much less high profile jobs, so that you don't get sacked as often. So there's kind of both. But the community TV station in Canberra was just such a great learning ground for me. I mean, you're always going to make mistakes in your job, but TV is a different kind of beast, and media and radio in that your mistakes are very public, right? Like if you work in the office and you make a mistake, your boss might point it out or your colleague might point it out. And, you know, that's for a lot of people, you know, it feels public and quite embarrassing, but when you're in the public eye, mistakes can have higher consequences. So to learn in a community environment where they're much more forgiving, I found incredible. I was never that natural. You know, I went to, I saw an ad in the paper for TV presenters, and I was at Uni of Canberra. I dropped out of like 6 other universities before that. I just kept enrolling and out, and, you know, I just didn't have that much commitment or direction. And I saw this ad and I went along and did an audition, and I was horrific, right? I was awful. So I'd email the guy once a week for the next 6 months. I never heard back from them, but his name was Stephen, and I knew that I could do the job really well. I knew that I was suited to it, but I also knew that I hadn't performed on that day. It was reading an auto cue and I was just awful, but I was desperate to just be given a chance. Like, often all you need is just one chance. So I wrote him an email for almost 6 months, once a week, and after that 6-month period, I got a random phone call and he said, you know, Erin, it's Steve. And I said, oh, hi, Steve. And he said, if I do a segment on our food show, will you leave me the fuck alone. And I said, absolutely. That's how I started, boys. I was at the Belconnen fresh fruit markets, like walking around and, here guys, here's my, carrot, here's my, I don't know why I chose those two fruits, but, doing stuff that I don't even know how to cook vegetables. So stuff that I wasn't that into, but hoping it would then kind of expand. And it did. Within a couple of months at that station, I was then hosting their business show, their sports show. We then got a contract with the local rugby union in Canberra, the local football. And so that kind of started my whole sports broadcasting at I was right. It was local level, so community sport. I was writing everything, voicing, editing, doing pieces to camera, the whole thing. And I did that for about 3 years and then went to Win Television in Canberra. So got into my first kind of commercial network. And that was just as challenging, rejection and your voice isn't good enough, your look isn't right. And then 3 years there, then ended up getting a chance at Channel 9. And that's kind of when, I guess when I became known in public and got a profile, when I became the first woman to sit permanently on that Footy Show panel. And that was, an incredible thing. Like you guys, I'd grown up watching kind of, the older version, which was, with Matty Johns on the show and Brian Girdler's Their House, Our House, and all these, Fatty Borton, all these incredible legends. So I remember my first ever show on the Thursday night and I'm so annoying. I do so much bloody work prior. And even now, say 15, 20 years into my media career, I still do the same amount of work that I did on day one. I don't need it. I could go on and host a show now pretty much without anything because, I've done it so many times and I've learned what's fun, but I have this thing in my head, what got me to here, I will never stop doing. So, I'd written 1,000 notes and I did my segment, nailed it. I was so excited. I got off there and David Ginzel, the boss, had sent me a text saying, well done, you nailed it. He also said, stop moving your fucking hands. I was like, yeah, fair point. I'm such a hand talker. But then I checked social media after that, and that was my first taste of, wow, I hadn't, I'd never been treated differently in my family as a woman. I'd never even, I was so unaware of kind of, I knew that at, Win TV, I was the only girl at the Raiders press conferences. I was the only girl at the Brumbies press conferences. But this was my first introduction to vile abuse, essentially all because of my gender. And, the were not that I didn't know what I was talking about, not that I had gotten a name wrong, not that I didn't understand the game. It was what I looked like, that I was disgusting, what I was wearing, that I should be in the kitchen, that I should be hit by a bus, that I don't belong, all those kind of things. So, yeah, that was the beginning of another phase of my life that was unbelievably amazing, but really challenging as well.
Yeah, I can imagine that's disgusting, and no human being should be subjected to that sort of abuse, and especially online, because those, we call them keyboard warriors. They just hide behind their laptop and screen and let go. A bit of a question off script, Erin, but did you feel like when you were copying that abuse, did you at any point think, this isn't for me? What if these people are correct? And how did that view your next 5, 10, 15 years in media?
Yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely. I'm a very different person now to the young woman I was back then. I was 25, I think, when that all kind of happened. And I felt like I was fairly resilient. Dad was in the army and he was, discipline was a big part of my life. Not giving up was a big part of my life. I thought I was really tough and resilient, but no, that took me to places that I'd never experienced, because that first night was one thing, but you imagine that, and that was nothing. The things that the level that it went to over the next, say, 5 or 10 years was pretty horrific, and a lot of them, 2 or 3 of them went from online to stalking me in person, having to be arrested, police charged.
Jeez.
Me fearing for my life, the safety of my daughter, some of the, and that was always the thing that I could never understand. I might sit at home and watch someone on TV like we all do and say, oh God, what is she wearing? Oh God, that person really annoys me. Like you say it to your partner, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Actually saying it to them or wanting them to believe it. So I felt really ashamed of it for ages because I didn't understand it. So I started to doubt myself and think, because in my mind, I'm like, everyone hates me. Everyone thinks I'm horrific. Everyone thinks I'm awful. But then I'm going, but why, if everyone wants this job and there's why do I have it? The boss is, Channel 9's not a charity network. If I wasn't popular with viewers and rating well, I wouldn't be there, right?
Of course, 100%.
It's hard kind of, you'd read all this stuff. And look, now I don't read anything, right? Don't read a thing, which I haven't done enough of well, maybe 5 years. But back then I was reading everything, and in your mind you think it's everyone. In reality, it's probably 5 people with 6 different accounts each.
Correct.
Absolutely annihilating you. But I before I started talking about it and before I pushed to get the laws changed, I was really embarrassed by it. I found it more embarrassing than anyone else. I used to get asked about it in interviews, and I didn't want to talk about it because there was this sense of shame. Like some of those things must be true, otherwise everyone wouldn't think it. And it took me to some dark places, like, the anxiety and I'd feel in the lead up to a show, like, Monday, we're working in the newsroom and the Footy Show being a Thursday night. And as well as doing my job in the newsroom, as well as preparing to do that job on Thursday night, I was also trying to prepare for what I knew. It wouldn't matter what I did, what I said, what I wore, how incredible I was, how much I nailed it. I knew what would happen on that Thursday night afterwards. And I knew that I'd drive home and the phone, would start pinging and you'd go. And I just knew that the next 2 days I'd just be a wreck. I'd feel sick. I'd be anxious. And it's awful, right? Like, so,
100%.
Yeah, like I'm in the public eye and people can, now almost nothing can hurt me. But back then, I kind of figured that I'm in the public eye. So people, of course, they're going to like me, not like me, have their say, write things online, go for gold. But what I couldn't handle was the stuff that was threatening, that was meant to make me scared for my life. It's like, Jesus, change the channel, mate. Like, you don't kill me, you fight me, like, change the channel. So it was a really hard period. And what makes me sad is that should have been, God, I grew up watching that show and I was the first woman to sit on that panel, then to co-host, then to host. I was on that 7 years, the Sunday Footy Show, all those incredible things that should have been, things I tell my 5-year-old daughter about in 5 years, about how amazing mummy's life was back then. But so much of it is associated with shame and pain and fear and loathing and self-loathing, because you start to believe it when people tell you so many times that you're awful, So, it's interesting. I haven't really thought about it much recently. So thanks, guys, for taking me back.
That wasn't our intention, Erin. I'm going to clarify that.
Again, like for me growing up as well, I grew up on rugby league, and it was the same thing for me where, you had Fatty Vorden, even when Slats came on, Darryl Broman, the Chief, Bo Ryan later in the time, Peter Sterling, these are all big names of rugby league. Michael Slater, more cricket, but at the end of the day, you coming on as that first woman, how I see it is you copped the brunt of it for a lot of the women going forward, without the experience that you went through, you look at the confident woman that you are today compared to, as you talk about in 2015, we all learned from these things. And I think without your experience, we wouldn't have the whole array of women in sport and the whole array of women in media. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I think there's always positives out of every negative. I think you can always find something, and in some ways I do look at that, and I was also the first woman on the continuous call team, which was a rugby league show on 2GB that had been going for years and years, and so to be the first in so many different ways, if that's made it easier for other women after me, then that makes me really, really happy. The other thing I'll point out is when you mention all those legends of the game, for the most part, they were absolutely incredible. Like those 4 people that I sat on that Footy Show panel with for 5 or 6 years. So Fatty, the big man, and Bo became, my bestest of friends. And I kind of, when I first started, I thought I need to get these guys on side, because if the audience is watching and these guys are dismissive or don't look like they respect me or don't look like me, then my job is impossible, essentially. So for the first few kind of months, I invested so much time in building really strong relationships with all of them, with their wives, with their families. And then that started to come across. And I remember it was like little things at the start, right, that I shouldn't have even had to be grateful for, but just made such a difference. Like Bo and I would have this thing like we'd, if one of us was getting a bit lost, or if he was talking and lost his trail of thought and it's live TV, then I would faint so that he would distract everyone.
What a way to distract.
He never had to look at me because I was so amazing. but just, the big man, like they're just, the big man, like we went holidaying to Bali together after the show, like in the off season, and I found out I was pregnant then with him and Bev, his wife, and like they were all so incredible to me. And the vast majority of other people who were commentating, of men essentially that were commentating, were amazing. So that was never really the problem. It was more the kind of and not even the people, not even the people at home, because the vast majority of those were fine. As you guys know, and probably knowing what you do as well, it's just that tiny little minority that, hates themselves, that is miserable and unhappy, and that is determined to try and make everyone around them feel the same way. So, yeah, I look now and it's not even, I used to do all these interviews and it was interesting because I was in the role as someone who would host things and do interviews. But then I became someone that other media always wanted to do stories on an interview. And it was this weird dynamic. And I would always be asked about being the first woman, being a woman, being a woman, being a woman. And I feel like that doesn't even happen anymore. Like I look at all the women across rugby league, across soccer, across cricket, AFL, and it's not even a kind of an interesting thing anymore. And that's, I love that. I don't think it's even a thing, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. No, 100%. I know my co-host Dovdell's got a brilliant question for you, but I just want to add before he does get to that, we've had on the podcast Catherine Canuli and Kat Haddad, two, we call them as well, trailblazers of women's media. And I work under Catherine Canuli in a football club, so she's the technical director and I'm just one of the coaches there. And every single time that I've mentioned to her that we're going to get you on, and Kat Haddad as well, their sort of face smiles and their demeanor smiles, because you were such a big positive and such a radical change on the typical stereotypical media that we've been accustomed to across especially sport and business, I would say. But back to your point about what you were saying about those haters that try to, that they are miserable and they are upset and they just want to bring something down. We call them just the loud minority. They're very loud, but they are a minority. So you've just got to keep that in the back of your mind and push ahead, because you know that you've got good stuff going for you.
No, that's really lovely. And I remember there was a time when I actually realized that this was not about me, that I'm not perfect. God, no, how boring I was. But there came a time a few years ago where it just clicked and I realized I am really bloody good at my jobs. I get paid a stupid amount of money to basically be myself, talk, have fun, have a laugh, do shows. I'm the most blessed person in the world. And if these pricks were right, then jeepers, my bosses must be really dumb. So it kind of hit me and I went, okay, and that then made it all so much easier to handle. It didn't stop happening, but I remember having this moment where I was like, oh my God, Erin, Mother Teresa could open an orphanage in Botswana and they would attack her. Like, it doesn't, cannot change their mind. You cannot be better to try and stop it. You are doing your very best and it is enough, and they are miserable. And then when I started to look into different elements of the law, when I was, articles would come out, fans revolt, sack Molan. I'd be like, holy shit, the fans are revolting. And then I'd open the article and be like, Timmy 101 douche says sack Molan. Where's all the rest of my fans? No, that's it. Fans revolt. So the way it's sold, the way it's sensationalized, but then when you look, you're like, okay, that's just one dweeb. Like, that's one. Like, so it helps. It does help.
And the way I kind of see it as well is like, similar to how you said at the start, I was never one that put myself out on social media, didn't get in front of a camera too much. So going from there to doing a podcast every week in front of a camera, putting yourself on social media, going out, getting recognized is a big step. And
life-changing, right?
Yeah. And to come back and cop all the flack and everything and all of that. And look, to this day, people still aren't happy, with things that we say. I'm sure there's things that you've said that people will come back and bite back, and the keyboard warriors will unite and, do their thing. But at the end of the day, my question is, how do you overcome that barrier of not letting it kind of get to you and not letting it kind of eat you alive during the week? Because it's not easy. And sometimes you'll recognize certain accounts coming back every week. So, like, how do you kind of stop yourself from going there? And any advice to those out there who kind of have to deal with this as well?
No, it's a great question. I promise I'm not just sucking up. You've got very good questions, you two.
We've done our research.
I think your exposure to it, like anything, the impact lessens over time. What I would do really is the biggest thing for me, and even doing the documentary that I did for Foxtel on off the back of the laws, Erin's law that was introduced into Parliament a few years ago, knowledge helped me immensely. Once I understood how this all worked, and once I understood the mind of most of these trolls, you go, oh my God, of course. why would that hurt me? It's got nothing to do with me. So that helps. But I've been exactly where you are. And it's, you think about what you guys do in the conversation you're having. You think about anyone sitting at home on the couch when they're watching sport, particularly. The things you say to your mate, the conversation, the banter, the laughs, the silly stuff. You imagine having to do 3 hours of that. So every morning on radio, I do 3 hours. Then I do an hour on TV. Then I do things like this. Then I write columns. Then I do da-da-da-da-da-da. As if you're ever going to be word perfect, as if you're
100%.
going to articulate things exactly like you'd hoped you would, as if no one does. And the expectation that you guys doing your podcast, have to be perfect the whole time is ridiculous. No one is ever. So for someone to, I didn't like the way you worded this, or you said this and that was wrong, I did. Sorry, you're human. And how boring would your podcast be if you were reading from a script that right? Like, and the thing is, own it. There's been times where I've said things, or probably more in my kind of situation, because I would I think I was brought up to be very kind. I'm very empathetic. The thought of anyone being hurt by anything I say makes me feel physically ill, right? Like I'm to my detriment sometimes, like I'm very soft and, I still the thought of people not liking me is not nice if I've done something. So owning it is a really good thing as well. And I kind of feel like, if you say something and you think, God, I wish I'd said it differently, just come the next week, mate, just like all you flogs all week have, corrected yourself or said something and then went, that wasn't right. I'm just going to own it. And I wish I'd said this. I didn't. Let's move on. And, keyboard warriors, people who want to punish you or bring you down for that, are so sad and so miserable. And once you realize that, once you even just look into a couple of studies on trolls, this will help you guys, I promise. Look into a couple of studies. And once you look at actually why they do what you do, you will realize that it wouldn't matter if you were perfect. They would find something every week to hate. And that's what they do. So it's hard. Like, I remember when my daughter was newborn and I'd had like these horrific incidences when I was heavily pregnant and guys were following me home from the Footy Show and sending me threatening messages, and police were involved. And I remember just sitting there with her in my arms, and it was the first year of that new Footy Show that they'd launched, and every day we were just getting hammered. People saying it sucks, it was crap. And I remember just sitting there, just tears streaming down with my daughter in my hand, just looking at comments on my phone. And it's awful, right? Like, and people don't understand. That's the other thing I found really hard is we're in such a unique world that people just ignore it. It doesn't actually work. So my 2 tips would be, just read a little bit into trolls, and that will immediately lessen the hurt that they have. And the second one, you've just got to build resilience. You've just got to identify what matters in your life. And when I had my little girl, that helped immensely because she became what mattered.
Yeah.
And it's like any skill, like dating or bloody exercise or try, the more you do, not for everyone, but the more you do, the better you get. So the more you practice and invest in being better at handling criticism or nastiness or anything else, the better you get at it.
Yeah. And essentially, and I think as I've seen with you as your career's gone on, you're unapologetically yourself. Sorry, I tongue-tied there. And I think being yourself essentially will kind of allow you to kind of build that wall and that barrier to block those things without even having to be affected by them. And I think as...
Sanderlands, like, people are offended all the time by things he says. He could not care less. He makes more money than everyone who's ever hated him. I know.
Correct.
And he is living. He's got a hot wife. He's got a good baby. He's making $10 million a year, and they reckon maybe more. Like, he would, if you search his name on like comments and articles or social media or whatever else. Yeah. He is unapologetically himself.
I love that about him. Genuinely, like 106.5, you jump on, it's a whole different radio station. Correct. Because they are themselves. And I've seen on your end as well, with Hughesy, Ed and Erin, it's the same vibe.
You can't pretend for 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. I don't have the energy. I'm a single mum with 4 or 5 jobs. I don't have the energy. And you know what? You kind of, and as you get older as well, and you guys will find as you get older, like I turned 40 last year, and my life has honestly never been better. I've never been more confident, never been happy, never had more fun, life just gets better and better and better. Life is incredible. It's the first time in my life I've just felt really happy and at peace, and I like myself. I love what I'm doing, and age as well helps. When you're younger, it's bloody hard.
No, that's excellent to hear. And quick one
you
before we...
got a long time, it's fine.
Trust me. I look young, but I am old.
How old are you? You look young.
Thomas, I'm 23, and Abdul is 24.
Thomas, you're a baby.
I'm 25 this year.
25.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're very much, but yes.
Hey, I'm a 90s kid, Erin. I'm born in 99.
Love that. That makes me feel less like dating still. Done.
Erin, so I'm a massive football nut, and you might know the term of soccer, but I've watched a lot of shows growing up with Santos, Sam, and Ed, and I know Ed sort of inside out. But Hughesy, describe him to me. What's his personality like?
He is, without any doubt, batshit. I am, without any doubt. But the greatest thing about Hughesy is his awareness of his own batshitedness. He's incredible. I know so many people in our industry. And look, if you're in the public eye and you've been in this for a while, you cannot be in the public eye for a long period of time and not be flawed in some way. But Hughesy's ability to be aware of his own, it's incredible, and it's rubbed off on me so much. Look, he's amazing. He's a great friend. We speak most days after the show, even though we speak for 3 hours on the show. He's someone that, I turn to when I'm struggling. He's actually, most people know him publicly. It's a bit like Freddie Fittler as well. Like Freddie's got funny, makes jokes, not serious, and that's the same as Hughesy on air. He's got this, real, he's a comedian, of course. He's had a very successful career as a comedian, but off air, he's still funny, but he's just the most amazing person. If I'm struggling with my daughter, I can pick up the phone. If, my boyfriend's a dick, I can pick up the phone. He's no nonsense. And also he and I have this great relationship. Like, we can fight. Holy shit. Like, we can, I left the studio on our last show last year because we were having an intense exchange with each other. And, I was in tears and he was and I'm like, and and like 4 hours later, he sends me a text, "Good luck on your show tonight." I'm like, what the? Like, great relationship because we're really honest with each other. It's like a family. You're together so much. There's a lot of pressure on you, particularly in our first, there's always pressure, but we're a new breakfast show starting in a market where like the 10 teams before us all got sacked. Yeah. It's high stakes, high pressure. You're constantly on edge. So to have relationships, and with Ed as well, where you're just great mates, and he's just an incredible human being, and his ability to identify his own bullshit is greater than almost anyone I've ever seen. Wow. It's amazing.
and when you go back to say you've got that mate there that kind of brings out, that almost relaxes you in a sense. Erin 9 years ago wouldn't be doing a handstand in the middle of a radio station.
To be honest, that part of me hasn't changed. The Footy Show, we had to do some stupid stuff, let me tell you. But you're right. Like, my whole thing was, and it's actually a really great point you raise, and why I invested so much time in front of, in the Footy Show guys on Thursday night, Sunday Footy Show, Friday night footy, all the things I'm hosting. For me to do my job to the best of my ability, I need to feel comfortable that those around me are not going to throw me under a bus or are not going to, that being comfortable means that I can do my best work. If I'm not entirely comfortable, or if I'm worried that, I won't make a joke because I'll go, what if no one laughs, and then I'll look like a dickhead, or I'll be afraid to be vulnerable and talk about, therapy last year for the first time, or talking about being insecure, or, if I'm not comfortable with the people around me, I'm not going to share parts of myself that are vulnerable. But because I am with them, and it's a different show, we laugh at sometimes the most serious of things, and it's the greatest, therapy in the world. When I was going through like my marriage breakup, or, with a child, like, that's horrific, right? You all of a sudden you've got this family that you thought you'd be with the rest of your life, and that ends, and then your child loses both parents together, and like, it's horrific. But I go, and I was on air that whole period, and I go in the morning, and Hughes would be like, "Oh, but you didn't really like it anyway." Like, like, I know that, but like, it's just, it's helped me through my friendship with him, and this show, and with Ed as well. It's just helped me through so many. I lost my dad recently in a marriage breakdown. You go through, I was in the middle of a court case. Like, there's just all these things that are hard, that being able to go to work and have a laugh and feel comfortable and feel supported and loved by your colleagues is just, it's the best feeling in the world.
On on Sunday, we know it's Mother's Day, and myself and Abdul, we're very lucky. We're still fortunate. We have our mothers around, and we've got a different perspective because our mothers, my mother works obviously, and Abdul's does as well. But we've never spoken to someone. What does a Mother's Day or being a mother look like to a woman that is constantly working in the media, in the public eye? How does that sort of relate to yourself and your daughter?
Oh God, I feel like a broken record. That's another really good question. And I know that you sent me questions because my beautiful PA told me. I have not read one because
that's okay. That's okay.
But I love these questions because they're so different. Like sometimes you get asked the same. These are amazing.
Thank you.
Really, I think mother guilt is something that all mums feel. And look, a lot of mums work, particularly in Sydney at the moment. You know, I don't know how anyone can afford not to have both parents working. But the beauty, like I work a lot, right? So I do breakfast radio, so I'm up at 4 a.m. You know, I've got a TV show on Sky, I write column for the Daily Telegraph, column for Stella, I've got a baby wear line at Best and Less, I've got other projects, I do a lot of hosting for charity events and that kind of thing. So I'm really busy. But the beauty of what I've built, and I've worked very, very hard to build this, is that nothing comes between me and being a mum. So what I've built around me is a lifestyle and a profession that enables me to be a present mother, which is the most important thing in the world. My biggest fear is looking back in 10 years and saying, I missed that with my child. I've only got one, I'll probably only have her. So like yesterday was a Mother's Day breakfast at school. And, you know, the old me 5-10 years ago would have been like, oh no, I can't miss radio because, you know, oh God, what if they replace me? What if this happens? What if da-da-da-da-da? But I just said, hey, team, I'm leaving at 8 on Friday to go to this. What are we going to do to prepare? Great. So I can now, and, you know, I might get offered a hosting gig or a corporate gig. If it's on the weekend, I have my daughter, so she goes to her dad's every second weekend. I just say no. You know, I'm in a position where I've built up, you know, enough that I don't need to take jobs anymore that I would have taken in the past. So I can say, look, if I've got my little girl, it's a no-go. Otherwise, like say, for example, just Saturday gone, I hosted the Charlie Teo fundraiser. And I said to them, look, I've got my daughter, so I'll get a babysitter, bring her, she can have a swim in the pool, but guys, at 8:45, I'm going to bed. So at 8:40, the babysitter brought her into the big ballroom with 1,000 people, you know, she runs up on stage in her pajamas. You know, I'm there, I make a joke about it, she's super cute, and I say, guys, this is single mum life, you know, we've raised this amount of money, love you all, see ya. And they love it, you know. I feel like I take her with me to work sometimes. I come home from work at 10 a.m. So she's at now, but before that I used to be a mum all day with her. So it's just, I feel really blessed because she is my whole world. But I was talking to a couple of mums at school yesterday. It is very funny though, because she's only 5. She doesn't quite understand. Like when we go places, a lot of people will ask me for photos. A lot of people will stop. They want to give me a hug. They want a photo. And this has been her whole life, right? No, I don't put her on Instagram or share her or anything. I don't let her be in photos just because I want her for her safety and so that
privacy,
later on, if she wants to be known or have a profile, I've made this choice, she hasn't. But it's so funny because she just assumes that happens to everyone's mum. She has no idea that not everyone's on television or radio. So I was laughing yesterday just thinking about when she starts to get a bit older and she's, you know, out with a little friend's mum and she's going, why aren't they all asking me? Like it's a different world. But what I hope is that what she doesn't have in terms of normality sometimes with a 9-to-5 job or with, you know, a mum who might be able to stay home with her child, which I have with my mum, which was so beautiful and I'm so grateful for that. I hope that the other things I can provide her with, which is these incredible experiences with mum up on a stage that she'll look back on or going to exciting things. Mummy takes her to work sometimes because mummy doesn't have a choice and, you know, but what it enables me to do is come home at 10 a.m. and love her for the rest of the day rather than most mums who come home at 5. So it's different, but I think Mother's Day to me is just, you know, it's about my own mum probably more than me, to be honest, how grateful I am to her. And it's just a lovely day to reflect on, you know, the challenges of it and just to reassess anything I could be doing better, you know, as well.
Yeah, and for me as well, like I look at it, you know, my mum does the same thing. There's times where she has to take my sister with her to work. She's a bit older than your daughter. She's 10 at the moment. So she's at that age where she's almost growing up, but she's still, you know, a kid at heart.
I can relate that, yeah.
I find it the annoying age because it's like they won't leave you alone, but at the same time, when you need them there, they're going, like it's that age for girls. So, But ultimately, you don't realize what your mum does for you and how much they actually do for you until you're a bit older. And sometimes people don't realize that till they're gone.
Yeah,
And
right. You're so right.
And I think the importance of having that mother figure in life, and kind of like, I'm the oldest of 4. My mum had me when she was 19. So I've kind of grown up with my mum in a sense.
And she would have been learning, like we all learn. I had my daughter at 35 and I'm still learning. But yeah, that would have been a really different experience.
Yeah. And how I kind of see it is she's taught me a lot because she's had to learn along the way. Like I would have been 5 when she was my age. So how important do you see your relationship is with your mother, and how she's affected your career and how you carry on with life day by day?
Oh, my mum's incredible. And I have had a dad who was, very high profile, and he was a major general and then a senator in parliament. So he was talked about a lot, but not really mum. But mum, and we all say mum's the most impressive in our family, hands down, times a million. Dad was in the army, so travelled a lot. He was away at war a lot. And she had 3 kids under 3 at one stage, and just the most incredibly beautiful, caring, loving. You kind of assume, I think, and hopefully you guys are the same, because it's meant that you've been as blessed as I have with parents, but I kind of just assumed that's what all parents were like when I was little, that all mums and dads loved you and cared for you. And yes, they were bloody annoying when they wouldn't let you go to that party because blah, blah's parents weren't home. But I now obviously understand that was for my benefit and because they loved me so much. And I think my relationship with my mum is, I call her 2-3 times a day. I look up to her so much. She's just so resilient and strong, and she's got so much class, and she's so, even, I'm a 40-year-old woman and I write columns for the Daily Telegraph on, the threat of war in the Indo-Pacific and, these really ridiculous things. And I still send them to my mummy like I did when I was in year 12 to edit, and I just... It's so funny. I've got these high-powered editors of like the Daily Telegraph. Hey, where'd you column? Ben, it's with my mum. Just give me 5, okay?
Is that a secret that we can disclose, or
I love it. That's so popular. No, absolutely. But it's funny. I'll write the whole thing, but she's got like 2 degrees in English. She's so smart and quick. And I tell you what, there is no shame in asking for help, or still, I just think it's hilarious that, yesterday a big full page, about Albanese's reaction to the helicopter incident this week, and I'm just sitting there going, yeah, mummy, help. I use the right commas in the right places because I'm such a dash writer, so often mum will just go through and take out my dashes and
starts writing it on top. Yep. But
yeah, she's amazing. She's the smartest woman I know. She's the most loving, and just even looking, I think it's funny. I always thought she was amazing, but the way she nursed my dad, who, we all loved more than life, through his last year or so of being, cancer's an evil thing. But to see her, like I always knew Dad was brave. Dad went to war. Dad ran the war in Iraq for a year. We always knew he was brave. But to watch Mum nurse the guy that she'd met when she was 17 and had loved for 60 years in that horrific way was just the greatest act of bravery I've ever seen. And yeah, she's incredible. I'm very blessed.
That's inspiring.
Look, I was going to say,
go,
I can kind of relate to that in a sense, and I know what you mean, because thankfully my dad, is still with us, but he had a heart attack, or we thought we almost lost him last year.
Oh, wow.
So to see my mum have to take on that responsibility, and me kind of have to pick up a second responsibility as well in that sense, I get what you're saying, and you don't realize how important, obviously, your dad is when you get to that situation, but how much your mum actually does. And it's sad to kind of,
That's amazing that he didn't have anything on mum, and he wouldn't mind me saying that. We all thought that. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, and the things they do sometimes, like the little things that you call your mum, oh, hey mum, can you do this? Hey mum, can you do that?
Small things.
The small things that they do, that if she was to ask you the same question when you were younger, sometimes you'll be like, oh, nah, I'm here, I'm doing this. I'm in the middle of a PlayStation game.
I remember being on the Footy Show. So this wasn't that lot like when I first moved to Sydney, and like getting off air and being like, rent's due tomorrow. Hey, mum, can you transfer $200 into, and I'm on the Footy Show. Like, it's those little things. Don't tell your father, he'll get the shit. There it is, it's in your account. I'm going to tell him it was for health insurance. And I'm like, I love you.
And the things that you tell your mum, don't tell dad. Let's keep this away from your mum's your inbuilt best friend that you'll have for the rest of your life.
It's just beautiful. And even, I'm in a different kind of situation in terms of being a single parent, but, I'm so lucky that my daughter's dad is an incredible dad, and we co-parent really, really well together, which, and it's just, that's another example of, I think, a sacrifice that mums make is that, often if those situations are really hard, and I'd always hoped if that happened, that my love for her would be greater than any hate or hurt I'd have with him. And it's just, every day, you've actually stopped and you go, God, I'm proud of myself. And I'm sure he's the same for putting her first, even when it's really bloody hard. And often things that you'll never see, things she'll never see, never know about, never understand, that have been really, really excruciatingly hard. But because I love her so much, that it's just not even a question, So there's all those things as well that parents do for their kids that they'll never be aware of.
No, that's excellent, inspiring to hear, and hopefully people in that similar situation can aspire to be like yourself and your ex-partner and co-parent like that. Last question, because we're wary of your time and stuff. What's your advice to up-and-coming people that want to start a podcast or pursue a career in media, especially young females? Is there still that stereotype, do you think? And if so, how do you break down that barrier?
I think in terms of in the sporting world, look, I think that there'll always be dinosaurs who don't think women have a place covering men's sport. I don't think any amount of time will eradicate them entirely, and, their loss is how I would look at that. I think the world's your oyster. I think podcasting is such a great way of giving everyday people who may not have gotten an opportunity somewhere else an opportunity to show what they can do. And it's, look at what you guys have done. Did you ever think that what you would be doing, right here now? And the fact you even have people that are listening and then sending you mean comments, like, what a privilege.
Hey, any attention's good attention, eh?
Yeah. I feel like, but for women as well, I genuinely don't think there's any, and to be honest, in some ways it's an advantage. I remember when I started at Channel 9 and I got the Footy Show gig. There was probably 7 or 8 blokes sitting in that newsroom, sports reporters who knew more than me, had been there longer than me, were incredible reporters that didn't get that opportunity. I did, because they wanted a woman, but they were waiting for someone capable. And they could have been sitting there going, this is really bloody, I'm sure they were, this is really unfair. I've been here for 6 years and I know more and I've done more and I've built up the thing, and I didn't get that chance, she did. I've then got to nail that chance to keep it, but there's a fair argument. The reason I got that chance is because I was a woman, and they were waiting and looking for the right woman to come along, but there were 6 blokes who probably were more deserving right at that time. So I think it's how you view it as well, in that being a minority can actually be an incredible advantage if you're willing to work through the initial discomfort of it. And I think, look, everyone can have a voice. Social media, in some ways it's an awful thing, but in other ways it's a great thing. And if you manage to tap into something that's authentic and something that people enjoy, then, the world's your oyster. So I think for me, as I said earlier, the working hard thing is a really big one for me. Like, before I got my first job in telly, as I said, I dropped out of uni. I wasn't particularly committed to anything like homework and school. Like, I did, fairly well. I got into law at uni, but I was pretty lazy. And then once I found what I loved, which was media, I then became the hardest working person I know. And I'd always say to myself, whenever I walk into a room, I may not be the prettiest, I may not have the most talent, I may not be the most experienced, but I will always be the hardest working. And I kid you not, from this day forward, I used to sit there on the Footy Show with 50 pages of handwritten notes, and kind of Fatty would be there, who's playing tonight, Dale? Right? He was a legend of the game, so his knowledge was already there. I had to work really hard, and I wasn't even an expert. I was just a host. I had to work really hard to do that. And that's been, even now, like my Sky show, I'm 3 years into my own show on Sky, which I just love so passionately. And I could probably, I've got a team who do everything. I could probably rock up at, 3 o'clock, get hair and makeup, say, guys, where are my scripts, and blah, blah, blah. But literally from the moment I get off air, I'm already thinking, I'm chasing, I'm trying to get interviews, trying to get talent. I've got ideas for editorials. I'm still doing every single thing that I did 20 years ago on that first day at that community TV station, because it's what got me here. And if you stop doing what got you here, then you're likely to lose it all. So the working hard thing, don't be afraid to work your bloody ass off.
Well said.
doing that as well, it creates such a great environment for the people around you. Like at the end of the day, if you're showing that you wouldn't do anything that you wouldn't ask of anyone else, it just sets the example for pretty much for the whole team. It's like, if I'm not doing my job properly and Erin, who's the face of the show, is doing it as well, it's like, what does that say about me? So
that I haven't said publicly, I got in trouble from my bosses at Sky maybe 2 months ago, and I was literally given this directive: do not contact your team until Wednesday night at the earliest, because so excited that we'd literally get off air. It'd be 6:05 p.m. on a Friday, and I'd like, okay, team, let's hustle, let's chase, let's do. And then all these like producers were kind of going to the bosses and going, you've got to pay me for all these hours, because so then I had to be like sat down and said, we love your passion, we love your enthusiasm, we love your drive. Please don't text them till Thursday morning at the earliest. I was like, oh, yeah, sweet. Sorry.
I'm just doing some work.
Now I have a note section in my phone where I'm like always putting all these ideas, and then I just go, well, here it is, my darlings, enjoy.
Yeah. This is built up 4 days worth of my brain going into my notes type of thing.
I didn't take it personally. I would much rather be that person than the person who does nothing every day of the week. Get it, guys, understood. And then now I just do it that way. So, it hasn't stopped the work I do. I now just deliver it differently.
No, 100%. And at UBF here, we got a really good quote that my father said to me when I was younger, and it stayed with me for the rest of my life. I might not be the brightest candle in the room, but I will outburn everyone else. Simple as that. It's quite good, actually.
Some ways, but it's great.
It does work. I
love that. The best that I remember, Dad, this is something I miss so much about him. When I'd call him and someone was being an arsehole to me, or someone had written a mean article about me or something, I'd ring Dad and blah, 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 and he'd just pause and he'd say, fuck him. Okay. Amazing. So literally that, whenever it comes into my mind and I move on, I'm like, yep, thanks, Dad.
I have to say, a good friend of ours, Martin, has a good quote that he's taught me.
Yeah, another quote.
Similar to that one.
I love quotes. I'm obsessed with this stuff.
F them all.
Awesome. See, Dad's wasn't enough. It was just f him.
With this one, it's just not f them all. But I do have to say, just touching on Sky, how is that being so different to the start of your career? Whereas now I've seen that you're much more confident, you're much more opinionated. You tell them how you feel. You are who you are at the end of the day. How does that compare to Erin back in 2013, 2014, and where you started there? And did you ever imagine yourself being where you are now?
No, absolutely not. And a very, very different person, incredibly different. Look, I always loved politics and foreign affairs and national security because of Dad's work, so I was exposed to that at a very young age. But it's wine and water, to be honest. It's funny, even now sometimes, like, my show is called Erin. It's a big banner comes up before it starts saying opinion, and then it's Erin, and I still have people emailing saying, just watch your show, I wish you'd stop sharing so many opinions. That's one. It's literally the only job I have on that show.
To give my opinion.
Yeah, like that would have, that would have hurt me years ago. I couldn't care less now. Look, it's very different. Football was a very different world, and look, challenging in its own way. But this is my passion. What I do now, and I get to advocate for causes I care about. I get to highlight stories or people who are struggling or doing it tough and make an actual legitimate difference. I get to talk about, conflict in the Middle East and about, the Indo-Pacific region, the threat of war with China, Taiwan, all these things that I, when I'm not working, I literally watch Fox News, I watch CNN, I watch BBC. I'm just obsessed with that stuff. So to have an outlet where I can, do it myself, it's amazing. So the footy stuff was never about me. A lot of it became about me because people would write about me, the narratives.
Yeah.
I became the story a lot. But on those shows, you watch back, I rarely gave an opinion. I wasn't an expert commentator. I was a host. So all I did was facilitate a discussion. So very rarely, I remember one day on the Sunday Footy Show, Freddie actually I'd gone to Freddie, Sterlo, Paul Gallen and Billy Slater. And then Freddie kind of looked at me and, well, what do you think? And I reckon 10 years in or 12 years in, I went, God, no one's even ever really asked me,
Wow.
I didn't even think to give my opinion because they're all left. I'm a host. If you were asking my opinion on hosting a TV show, absolutely I'm well qualified. But, on rugby league or playing rugby league, of course I'm not. So that was very different. That was hosting and facilitating a discussion amongst other people. The show I have now is my show, my baby. It's my passion. It's what I think. And I get a lot of people on who disagree with me, which is great. But I never would have thought that I'd have had the confidence, because you can go one of two ways, right? And you guys are right at the start of this. At the start, I could have completely shrunk with all the hate and the nastiness and the threats and the vile stuff. You could completely shrink and be someone who does not put their head up ever. So I just do my job. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do other projects. I wouldn't, say something that people might hate or might find controversial, or I might be smashed over. Or you can say, this is me. I always want to do this with love and respect and truth. But if I feel something, even if I think it might not be popular, or if I feel differently than the person sitting next to him, but I think, oh God, our audience probably agrees with him, not with me, I'll still say it now, because, you got to live your true authentic self. So don't let little bits of hate early on from people who don't matter make you become less than you are. And I almost went the opposite. I think I've almost just went, thank you, come along for the ride. I'm only going to get bigger.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, I don't think myself being 13, 14, 15 at the time would have understood it. And I haven't completely understood it until I started doing this podcast with the impact and the role and all the difficulties that came along with being a woman in sport and a woman in media, especially us getting into the footballing, the women's football side of stuff, and being heavily involved in that type of thing. Like Thomas coaches women as well. It's crazy. It really is. And I think your ride, your journey to where you are today is genuinely unbelievable. Like, not many people would make it out and come as far as you have.
No.
And not many people would have probably gotten past that first year, because I used to watch the Footy Show. You had they'd finish up with the pastor. I forgot what it was.
I remember, Jesus.
Yeah, and like it was just it was jokes and it was funny and they'd have a laugh and something's got to be inappropriate, but you never saw it for the back end of it. It's like you came in genuinely as a host, and I agree with, now that I look back on it, it's true. You came in, you facilitated a conversation. I don't know what they expected bringing in. The fans expected to bring in someone who can out-talk everyone. The show was never about that.
No, and I would not ever think to, because God, that's the first one. If I sat there and said, look, Freddie, Sterlo, Gus, my become playable now on the non one. God, no way.
Yeah. And that's not you at the end of the day.
No, I can't even touch my toes, let alone play rugby.
Look, and even when they brought Yvonne on, it was the exact same thing.
Well, she, I must say, she was slightly different in that she'd actually played rugby league, and she was rugby league through and through. So if she actually wanted to become more of an expert commentator, she definitely could have.
Hence why Fox picked her up, though.
The host, no chance.
Yeah. There's a reason Fox Sports took her over to the other side. I think that they gave her her own show as well.
She's amazing.
Yeah, and I go back to say, we wouldn't have your Lara Pitts and your, like all of those going forward. Even nowadays where we had Kat Haddad,
100%,
Michelle Escobar on the soccer side, Kat Sasso. You'd think it started with yourself on the Footy Show, and now you forget TV. You've got hosts on social media. You've got
100%.
hosts here. You've got there. Like when I genuinely say Trailblazer, I mean it. Like, I genuinely think that you led the way for a lot of people, and maybe you don't realize it yourself, but now that I look back on it, it's true.
No, you guys are amazing. So I've really enjoyed this. You're just, you guys you've got real talent, and I'm so excited to watch your journey over the next few years as well. But thank you so much for the lovely trip down memory lane, except for really horrific negative things you brought up. But apart from that,
there's one thing that we're going to leave you on, Erin, and it would be wrong of a football show, in your words, soccer, to not ask you one question about soccer. Who's your GOAT, Ronaldo or Messi?
Oh God!
You can pick one.
Richie McCaw. That's it. Let's go Ronaldo.
She's part of the podcast.
I remember I've been to one A-League game in my whole life, and that was when Del Piero, I think in Brisbane against the Raw, scored like 6 goals. It was like 6.
Yeah.
And someone said to me, you realise this doesn't happen in football, right? It doesn't. So lucky. Yeah, cool, man. And then I was like, afterwards, wow, that's incredible.
No, it is true.
Put it this way. I think in rugby league terms, Nigel Van Gunner scored 5 tries in one game.
No idea.
For Del Piero to score 6 goals.
Adrian Bell once scored 5 goals. I remember for the Raiders. I can't remember who against, but yeah, not many of them have those. Very rare.
No, Erin, from the entire UBF team, we'd just like to say a massive thank you to yourself and your team, and to be able to facilitate this, and hopefully we can catch up soon and have another interesting discussion, I'm sure.
I would love that. You're both so brilliant. Abdul, thank you so much for having me, and yeah, I can't wait to share this as well.
Happy Mother's Day as well.
Likewise.
Oh, thank you. You're very. My daughter's with her dad this weekend, so I'm really...
You can have a different type of Mother's Day, Erin.
He did say he wanted to pick her up for an hour, and I was like, oh.
It was nice to offer.
All good. Well,
Thank you so much.